In this lecture, we're going to continue our investigation of qualitative ways to engage in research activities. And continuing with the naturalistic approach to inquiry, the third or the next aspect is referred to as grounded theory. And in this sense, theories are developed from direct observations and are therefore grounded in such observations. In doing so, the researchers use an inductive reasoning process in order to develop such theories from their observations. And the process here involves the collection of information. If notes are taken, those notes would have to be transcribed and sometimes can be coded for subsequent analysis. And this approach can use quantitative measures. So if qualitative information is obtained, assigning quantitative values to it can often help with coming up with definitive conclusions. This approach is not based on preconceived research hypotheses. And although the researchers may have some hypotheses that would guide the research, the method of of information collection is not based on confirming or refuting such hypotheses. And this process involves a constant comparative analysis, which is to say that as information is gathered, it's examined for agreement or disagreement with other ideas. And so this is a constant process where information is obtained by the researchers, and instead of waiting until all of the data or all of the information is collected for analysis, it is analyzed on the fly. And this refines ongoing theory. And so that the development of the theory as observations are made is continually refined as more information comes in. And so what constitutes expert practice in psychotherapy often is grounded upon this approach where theories are developed based on observations. And so, as an example here, virtue, clinical reasoning, and knowledge will help to establish a psychotherapist to advance from a competent level in working with patients and clients to expert level. That process is an ongoing process as the psychotherapist gathers information not just about the patients and clients that they are working with, but also how they are responding and drawing information from those patients or clients. The one aspect of qualitative research that's similar to quantitative research is the issue of validity and reliability, and this is something that is always something that should always be considered with research. So with quantitative research approaches, it's much more feasible to establish validity and reliability, and the evaluation of measurement error or data variability is a very common inclusion with quantitative research. Qualitative research establishes what are called judgments on the part of the researcher, and these judgments attempts to establish the variability in people's perceptions, attitudes, and other such variables. In terms of internal validity, when we talk about internal validity, we go to the credibility and the truth of the information with respect to qualitative research. External validity deals with transferability. So how applicable is the information gathered from the researchers in a qualitative manner to other people in similar situations. To examine reliability with qualitative research, terms such as the consistency of responses and the dependability of such responses will hinge upon the nature of the questions asked and how that information is gathered. To examine one such approach of of using a qualitative approach here is with this example of an editorial published in the Toronto Star. And by examining the title here, Freedom Protests Are White Supremacy in All of Its Glory, this statement could start the qualitative research approach. And the qualitative research approach, as similar with quantitative, will undergo information gathering to examine and expose the truth behind research questions and statements such as this. And so to begin with this approach, information or data has to be collected. And the very first step is what are called field observations. And this is what is undertaken by the researchers prior to conducting interviews with potential participants. And the purpose of the field observations is to identify people, how those people interact with each other, and how various social-cultural factors are influencing those interactions. The researcher would carry out a process in which they record what are called field notes. The researchers are quiet and inconspicuous in this situation, where they are just simply observers without interacting and just allowing the natural course of events in that situation to unfold. And so there are no interactions at this point with field observations with potential research participants. Recording is possible at this stage of information gathering, provided that ethical standards are maintained. And one of those ethical standards is to maintain and to ensure and guarantee confidentiality for those research participants. The next step would be participant observations. And a participant observation is where the researcher describes their experience through participating in that sort of interaction. So the researcher would embed within the group or the environment. On the previous slide, the field observations, the researchers are standing or are positioned at the periphery of the natural course of events that are taking place. In this case, the researcher actually becomes a participant with participant observations. However, this approach could lead to potential problems. And the first problem is that observations may be and are likely inherently biased. So researchers also bring their own biases to a research approach, but the researcher should attempt to take as objective a view as possible. So the researchers' own preconceived notions, their own philosophy on issues, and their own attitudes, perhaps shaped by their previous experiences, could factor into a subconscious qualitative research approach. And that subconscious approach would have the researchers focus on certain events or certain occurrences within a larger setting that would align with their own attitudes. And so the researchers, by taking this qualitative approach, must understand that this is a certain possibility and to undergo methods to ensure that the information as gathered is not influenced in that manner. Interviews would be the third stage in conducting qualitative research, in which there is direct contact between the researcher and the participant. The research team could conduct, or the researcher could conduct, what are called focus groups, small gatherings of individuals and that interact with each other. And this can be a more efficient way to gather information as opposed to scheduling individual interviews with research participants. But in conducting individual interviews, the structured interview would be a somewhat of a formal, more objective approach in gathering that information, where the researcher develops a rather broad-based script that would guide discussion through the questions. And so this process is somewhat dependent upon a researcher that is skilled in developing questions as well as anticipating follow-up questions, and is dependent on the researcher's knowledge on the topic that they are investigating. So this ends our Unit 5 lecture on qualitative research.